Welcome to Learn at Work, a webinar series presented by Work, a journal of prevention, assessment, and rehabilitation. I'm Kara Jacobs, the founding editor of Work, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. The 2018 and 2019 Learn at Work webinars are presented in cooperation with the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society, and I do want to extend a thank you to them and also to iOS Press for sponsoring this webinar. And now I'm going to turn the webinar over to Patricia, who is our speaker today. Welcome, Patricia, and let our listeners know where you're located.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for the introduction. I'm Patricia Tegmeyer, and I'm going to talk about smart devices and physical strain. I'm a research associate at the German Federal Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, and we want to improve the safety and health and the humane design of working conditions. My unit is human factors and ergonomics, and we are an interdisciplinary team with background in mechanical and process engineering, psychology, sports science, as well as sociology, economics, and computer science. And we give special attention to new and emerging technologies, for example, lightweight robots and modern and mobile ICT. And in the context of smart industry, smartphones, tablets, and other smart devices gain increasing importance, allowing for new ways of working. And on the right side, I inserted key visuals from 3 of our current projects. And as you can see, in all of them, people are using touchscreen devices at work. Therefore, based on our understanding of human factors and ergonomics, we are interested in the human factors and physical, cognitive, and organizational ergonomics resulting from using such smart devices as work tools. So, in order to identify possible ergonomic challenges, especially with organizational safety and health aspects in mind, we conducted a literature search on PubMed, EBSCOhost, and Web of Science from 2007 onwards, which was the year the first iPhone was released, to identify possible physical strain associated with using touchscreen devices. Most of the studies, as you can see here, were focused on biomechanical parameters, and most of them were conducted in labs. There were some field studies in between and some clinical data, and unfortunately, only 2 studies addressed a specific working condition. So we couldn't get a clear view what it's going to do while working, but we did, we've conducted the research, and as we focused on safety and health at work, the search was restricted to an adult population, and only papers in English or German were included. We identified at first 1,262 papers, but in the end, only 36 papers were included in the full text analysis, most of which focused on body joint angles and or muscle activities. So this is what I'm going to talk about in the next slides. We're given in the studies, results were assessed with respect to the potential for musculoskeletal disorders in reference to the Rapid Upper Limb Assessment, the RULER, by Makatami and Corlett. And in RULER, postural metrics are evaluated in relation to a neutral zero position, which represents the lowest risk level. As you can see on the right, the neutral zero position consists of a straight back. The head and neck are not bent or twisted, with the eyes looking straight ahead. The upper and lower arms are located sideways of the body, and the hands are in line with the arms, the straight wrists and the thumbs facing forward. A higher score signifies a higher deviation from the neutral position, and therefore a greater level of risk for musculoskeletal disorders. But because the studies differed and the joint angles measured, I will just give the results for the angles separately. And the second, because ongoing and intermittent muscle tension may lead to physiological fatigue, and in the long respect to musculoskeletal disorders, we also took a look at muscle activities reported, and they were rated using different thresholds given by hours. I hope I pronounce them right. Sjogard, Johnson, and Jorgensen. Jorgensen found no muscle fatigue after working for an hour with a muscle activity of 10% of the maximum voluntary muscle contraction, the MVC. So that's the highest threshold I used. And the latter were 5%, according to Johnson. Sjogard reported muscle activities well below 5% to be tedious after an hour. So we had another threshold below 5%, and RAS indicated a reduced risk for musculoskeletal disorders regarding muscle activities in the neck and shoulders, in particular if the MVC was lower than 1%. So all of these were used rating the activities given in the papers. What were the results? First, the neck and shoulders. As you can see, there are different risk levels, and for the neck, if you take the ruler ones, the first risk level is given for an angle of 0 to 10 degrees. The second risk level is recorded for angles between 11 and 20 degrees, and the highest risk level is given if the neck is flexed with more than 20 degrees. Neck angles were reported in 26 conditions in 9 different papers, and as you can see, 3 papers reported neck joint angles exceeding 40 degrees. They are the one on the most right. It's really severely bent. The shoulder flexion is nearly insignificant, as the devices are raised and held at eye level by bending the elbows, so the shoulder flexion was not that high. But additional ruler points were assigned for hunched and raised shoulders, reported in 9 experimental conditions. So with hunched shoulders predominantly reported for texting on tablets. So you can see there is already some risk at a high level. And if you look at the muscle activity for the neck and shoulder muscles, only 2 research groups opted for measuring muscle activity in the neck. And there were 6 conditions, and so 4 times out of 6 activity above the 10% threshold were measured. In contrast, 9 groups measured trapezoid activity. However, the trapezoid activity is of limited use as neck flexion indicator. It's more relevant to the upper back, thus reflecting the static effort of holding the devices. And it depends a lot on the height a device is held at, respectively if the device is resting on anything. Muscle activity of the shoulder and upper arm muscles mainly reflect the static effort of holding the devices, depending on position and weight of device and executed movements. And you can say the shoulder activity, there were one condition resulting in MYC above the 10% threshold and 8 about between 5 and 10% of MVC. And these are the ones where multi-touch gestures were involved. Because if you do multi-touch gestures on your smartphone or your tablet, they involve the whole arm, generating additional muscle activity. So it's really not only the fingers used in the touch gestures, but also the shoulder. So there we have a problem. There's no optimal placement for handheld touchscreen devices because of the unity of display and the virtual keyboard. Well, it makes it difficult to position the device in a way equally optimal for all body parts involved. If you held it at head height, there is little strain on the neck, but the upper back, shoulders, and arm bear the load. And if you place it on breast height, or if you place it low on the lap, you have low activity in the upper back and arms, but you probably bend your neck in an extreme angle forward. If you try changing one physical parameter, it affects all the others as well. Where possible, I think it's best to position the device, it should be varied, to spread the physical strain evenly. And in addition, smartphones and tablets are used in extremely varied surroundings. So ambient illumination affects not only the visual system, but additionally, it may lead to reflections and glare. And while trying to prevent these, and in order to heighten the contrast, users sometimes adopt a range of rather unbeneficial positions. So it's not only the holding the device, but you have to take the illumination into account as well. And if you have to help the devices unsupported for a longer time because there's no table and nothing you can lay them down on, it's better to favor smaller ones because they're lighter. On the other hand, if you need a larger screen because you want to read something or you have some graphs you want to read, it's crucial that you have a larger device. So there's no optimal, you have no chance to have the one device which is useful for everything. Now, to wrists and thumbs. When using smartphones and tablets, wrists are often extended or flexed depending on what you do. As you can see, 8 conditions reported a deviation of more than 50 degrees from the neutral position, which is quite much and resulted in a risk level of 3, the highest in ruler. And furthermore, 13 conditions showed a sideways deviation, ulnar or radial, of the wrist, resulting in additional ruler points, indicating an even higher risk of musculoskeletal disorders. So the risk is really at risk, yes, because of using the devices. And as ruler does not include thumb angles, the following risk levels for the upper thumb joint are derived from Drury and joint angles from Baccarat. So a moderate exposition will be at 20 to 39 degrees, which resulted in a risk level 2, and 40 and higher, resulting in a risk level of 3. You can just try to bend your upper thumb at an angle of 40 degrees. It's not easy. It's really flexed, and it's extremely depending on the operation mode and the position of the touch controls. If the device is held in the right hand, and the more right and the lower the bottom is, the more flexion is needed to get it. Sorry for that. So you can see in 6 papers called the thumb flexion of the upper thumb was above 40 degrees, which is rather flexed. The muscle activity in wrist, fingers, and thumbs, well, for the hand, activity can be recorded for 8 different thumb muscles and additional finger muscles. Unfortunately, due to their proximity, it isn't possible to measure them all in parallel, and different research groups investigated different thumb and finger muscles. Therefore, the results can't all be matched, and I'm not able to present them all in one slide, so I just took some of them. As you can see above, the wrist extensor and the flexor, there are some conditions where they are above the threshold of 5% MYC and some even above the 10% MVC. And that's because you often flex them, the wrists, real hard, and while holding the devices. The finger flexor and extensors are involved both in multi-touch gestures like zooming, but even more in holding and positioning the devices, especially smartphones, in one hand. So depending on what you're doing, and if it's a smartphone or a tablet, we had results reported with a really high muscle activity above 10%, both in the finger flexor and the extensor. The muscle activity of the thumb also depends a lot on the executed activities, and as you can see, there are real high muscle activity above 10% MVC, and these are especially recorded when the thumb is used while texting. So what do we have? The wrists are often severely bent, and the thumbs are used almost solely while operating the devices via texting and multitask gestures. So it's somewhat new, the physical strain on the thumbs evoked through texting and multitouch. In classic typewriting, thumbs are used for the space key only. the results presented in various studies led to the conclusion that fast and repetitive one-handed movements during texting increase the risk for tenosynovitis, especially of the thumbs. With regards to lessening the demands on the thumb, longer text passages should be written with medium tempo and using both hands, and even better if you don't do it on the smartphone at all. Thumbs seem to be especially at risk if smart devices are used for prolonged periods. Unfortunately, the term prolonged is used quite differently throughout the papers, as a quantity of text messages per day, text typed in a certain time, or the amount of time the devices were used per day asked in retrospect. So it's a bit hard to say how long you may use the devices safely. And well, the problem using both hands, if you just try to lessen the risk using both hands, well, you not only involve the thumbs, but also the wrists and shoulders. So the smaller the touch screen, the more closely both hands have to be placed together. And especially while using a virtual keyboard, the shoulders are bent forward and the wrists are deviated outwards. So using mobile touch devices harbor physical strain for both shoulders and wrists. Likewise, because of the larger virtual keyboard, a tablet is easier on the thumbs while texting for longer periods. But if the device has to be carried and held, as I said before, for longer time spans, smaller smartphones might be the device of choice. So again, we have not one device which is the best for everyone. And yeah, you can see on the pictures on the right, it's how much the wrists are bent. And you can try it yourself if you take your smartphone, and if you position them, it's really hard to do it in a zero neutral position. You're just going to lose your smartphone or your tablet. So you have to bend your wrist, and you have to flex your thumb to use it. So, what are conclusion? Well, yeah, as with all computational devices, musculoskeletal complaints arise as a result of non-neutral, partly static posture, frequent repetitive motion, and high muscle activity. So the reviewed literature indicated an elevated risk of physical stress, especially for the neck, wrists, and thumbs. And as the technology as well as the use of smart mobile devices is changing, it's not we need further research, especially measuring the term prolonged periods and specific work-related tasks, because the one use mostly texting, and in a working environment, you won't use your tablet or your smartphone a lot for texting. mostly you do some documentation, you use some of the buttons, but you won't text for prolonged periods. So we need more specific work-related tasks to say how long it's useful to use the devices. And as a work equipment, as for now, we would say it's most appropriate to use for short term. And also, it's not, self-imposed postures do not lead to significantly less strain than predetermined ones. So it's the same if you say how it should be used, or if you're free to use it. It largely depends on the environment. If there's a table, you can lay the device down, and it's much easier to type on a tablet. But to see what you type, you have to bend over it. So you have the flexed neck and the bent wrist as well. And we have no no time when it's without any risk, but we can try to use it in a way which is the most less risk. And so don't use it for too much texting. And I think that's the take-home message for now. So thank you. And your questions?
Hi, Patricia. This was so interesting. I kept looking at my own smartphone and my fingers, and I got a few text messages that came through when you were presenting. And I'm like, oh my gosh, at least leave it on the table. But then was in terrible posture. This is so important because, you know, we can look at the statistics of how many people have smartphones in the world, and the number is just growing.
Yes,
So
constantly.
Constantly, and we know that new technology will evolve, but probably the smartphones will be here for a while. So I've got a couple of questions. One, how can we provide prevention strategies for children? Because the children are starting to get smartphones at a younger and younger age, and their duration of using these phones will be quite long. Do you have any ideas of perhaps what kind of strategies teachers, administrators, ergonomists, occupational therapists, parents might use to help kids not develop some of these issues that we're seeing?
As my main focus is on the aspects of work, I've not done a lot of research about children and smartphones and tablets, but while I was conducting the literature search, and I talked to my children because of the risks, they, just talking about it helped a lot. My son just said, well, now I try to less flex my neck, and I try to do it in a better way, because I don't think we have any chance of to take the devices away. They are here, and they are here to stay, and I think it's best to talk about it, and to talk about the risks. If you vary your position while using the devices, there is the possibilities to spread the physical strain more evenly, and so have a lesser risk overall.
Great, thank you. Now we've got some questions from our participants, and I'll read this to you.
Mhm.
Would you say that using a tablet, such as an iPad, is better than a phone?
Well, it depends largely on what you're doing with it. I won't use a tablet to phone a friend. So no. I think if you're just reading something and you're not well, you're on the way and you have to hold it a lot, then I think it's much easier to use the smartphone because it's has less weight. Um, if you have to write a lot, then I would use a tablet, and I even would use an external keyboard. So it's much easier on the wrist typing on the keyboard than on the tablet itself because of the glass um, screen. It's really hard on the fingers, and you have no haptic feedback, so you don't know where you are. So if you have to write a lot, I think I would use an external keyboard or at least a tablet because it's easier to on the thumbs. But if you just want to read something, to check your mail, to get some information, and you're underway, then perhaps the smartphone may be more useful. There is no optimal device for everything.
Yes, that seems to be very apparent from your study and the evidence literature. We have a few more questions, and you answered some of this. Um, are there any equipment that improves the posture when using a tablet? And you mentioned an external keyboard. Anything else? A stand, a mouse, or anything else that you would recommend?
Yes, certainly. A stand is great because you it's much easier if you stand up the on a table and you can look at it like you can look on a normal computer display. You have to bend your neck a lot less, so it's much easier on the neck if you can do that. Um, but well, it's not always possible. It depends on the environment. If you're underway and you're in a train, then most of the time it's not easy to position your tablet in a stand and use an external keyboard. If you have the possibility, I think it's much better to use these or even use a laptop maybe if you have the possibility because then you have the screen and the keyboard split already.
Great. So, this question is from Sue. Do you have any general guidelines you could share for, use of the smartphone or even the tablet?
Mm, well, yes, we tried to get uh, some some of these, but well, it's really not easy because the papers we looked at were so diverse, and so um, I think we can say that you should use them. Um, It's crucial factors are the duration and the intensity using the devices, particular with regard to biomechanical workload. Um, So just, I think mobile devices are recommended for short-term work and intermittent with frequent breaks and or other work activities. That's all I can say at the moment. Try to use them in the right environmental conditions with good light to prevent glare and reflections, so you don't have to bend sideways or put the device over your head just to see what's on the screen.
That's such good recommendations, because light really makes a difference. And Sue said, thank you. So I'm going to ask, I think this is a fun question. If you received a big grant and you didn't have to worry really about funding, what would be the study that would sort of capture your heart to advance this body of knowledge? What kind of study would you design? You have unlimited money.
Unlimited money, great.
Fantasy, but let's play it out.
As I really believe that most digital technologies can provide great opportunities with respect to organizational safety and health if used for the right tasks. I like to research, but the opportunities really for as a resource for organizational safety and health. And as a matter of fact, coming next week, we'll start a small study to investigate the proper time span for using touchscreen devices for work-related tasks, especially with respect to service jobs. Perhaps you have seen, for example, waitresses using smartphones or PDAs for taking your orders, and smartphones and scanners are used in logistics as well as in health jobs. So I'm in the happy position to do the research I really want to, even if I don't have the really unlimited funds.
Well, those are all populations that I think could really benefit from more research. And thank you for playing out that ideal scenario with having unlimited funding, which is what we know is very challenging in academia. But it's fun. It's fun to think about. So, Patricia, this was such an interesting webinar. I know this was your first. You did such a great job. Any last thoughts?
Thank you.
Oh, fabulous. And any last thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with at this point?
Well, just that I think that if used for the proper tasks, tablets and smartphones can be quite useful as a work equipment or private use. Just don't use them for prolonged typing.
Thank you. That's a great conclusion. And I want to thank you again for being a speaker, a guest speaker on Learn at Work. And I want to thank our listeners for being here too. Thank you once again. And
thank you for having me.
Oh, it was fabulous. I'm so impressed. Thank you again, everybody. And we hope you'll join us for future Learn at Work webinars.